Good afternoon. It's Saturday, August 27th, 2022. We're about to induct the Kittitas County Junior Sheriff's Posse into the Ellensburg Rodeo Hall of Fame. And representing that group this afternoon is former member and current Ellensburg Rodeo Director, Rick Cole. Rick, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Nip. It's a pleasure for me to be here on behalf of the group.
Yeah. State your full name, Rick, and birth date and birthplace for the record.
Well, my name is Rick Cole. I was born on September 9th, 1947, across the street from where I lived until I was 11 on 3rd Street in Ellensburg, Washington.
Tell us a little bit about your folks and your connection to the Kittitas Valley.
Well, my dad was an Olympia, was a Washington native, but he grew up in Colfax and Olympia. And after the war, when he realized that he wasn't being shipped overseas, he and my mother had met when he was in the Coast Guard Academy back in Connecticut. She was a Philadelphia girl, and so he moved her out here, out west, and they apparently decided they liked Ellensburg, and he settled in Ellensburg in 1946.
Okay.
And was an attorney, and then ultimately was judge of the Superior Court here. My mother was a first grade teacher for decades, but she had been infected with the love of horses from early in her childhood as a result of the Army cavalry in Philadelphia. There was a cavalry unit in Philadelphia, and they gave riding lessons, and that started her and her younger sister Jackie into horses. And so when my mother moved to Ellensburg, she wanted to have horses, and so I was stuck on the back of a horse at 4, even though I was a city kid.
Okay.
And my aunt and uncle lived out on the Tipton Road, and so we kept horses out there at their place and would go out there and ride and enjoy the country. So that's kind of how it happened. And my house happened to be about 2 blocks from the Ellensburg Rodeo grounds. So I grew up on Craig's Hill, and the fair and rodeo were a presence in the house auditorially. I mean, you could hear it.
Sure. Yeah.
And so every chance I got, I would go over there and see what was going on.
How did you first become involved with the Junior Rodeo Posse?
Well, of course, like I said, we had horses, and my sister was a horse nut, even more so than I was. And so as soon as she was old enough, she wanted to join the Wranglerettes. And
Sure.
I think she might have been a founding member of the Wranglerettes.
Okay.
But because of that, I got interested in doing the same thing. We rode equitation, Western stock saddle seat equitation, and there were a lot of competitions in the county at that time. And so I went that direction, and when they announced they were going to start this boys riding group, the Kittitas County Junior Sheriff's Posse, I was an original member of that group, and I was 12 at the time.
What were the age parameters for membership?
You could ride at pretty much any age if you could handle a horse.
Okay.
My brother, I think, actually was riding in the group when he was 9 or 10. And we had all kinds of age groups. We had Fred Neuschwander was our oldest member.
Okay.
And I think he was a senior in high school or thereabouts, and then George Mitchell and Ron Carlson were older than I was. And the rest of the group, Mac Bledsoe, Johnny Vaughn, others, the Storley boys, they were all kind of in my age group.
Okay.
So
That would have been 1958.
58. Yep.
Okay. I'm embarrassed, the Wranglerettes were founded prior to the
I think they were.
Junior Posse.
I think it wasn't a long time prior, but it was prior.
Yeah.
So that was kind of what we did. And so we rode my sister and I competed in the Western stock saddle seat equitation all the time, and the trail class, and then we were in the riding groups.
You mentioned that the group included kids from 8 to 18 or
Yep.
thereabouts. Did you compete as one group, or did you compete in age categories? Or?
So we competed in, there was a junior riding, there was a boys junior riding drill team competition statewide. So we would go to rainwater stables over in Kenmore and Enumclaw and Olympia, and all different places to compete against other junior riding groups. So we would have a drill competition.
They weren't necessarily affiliated with rodeos.
No, some of them weren't.
Okay.
I think ours wasn't named Rodeo, but that was our principal event. I rode in the Grand Entry when I was 12.
Oh my gosh.
And no helmet either.
Hey man, cowboy hat?
That's right.
Yes sir.
You bet.
How was your family involved in the Ellensburg Rodeo in particular, Rick?
I don't think my dad was. I think he might have been on the fair board at one time.
Okay.
But he wasn't involved with the rodeo. My mother was involved only because she had 2 kids riding, or 3, sometimes 3, riding in the Grand Entry.
Okay.
So, and she always went to the rodeo. She always sat behind the timed event chutes up in section BB there because she wanted to watch the horses work. And that's what she loved.
Remind me where BB is.
So it's right behind the chutes.
Okay.
It's right in that corner.
Okay, yep.
And that's when they were built. I mean, when we started riding in the Grand Entry, of course, there was no seating in the West End at all.
That was open.
It was open. There was just a fence and grass over there. And the timed event chute came out of the corner. It basically would have been coming out of the bandstand of the behind the chutes now.
Okay.
Came out at an angle.
Okay.
Towards into the arena.
More so than what I would have remembered as a child in the 70s.
I
remember it being
literally
cockeyed.
came out of the north fence.
Okay, okay, yeah.
It
And just
came out-
gradually moved south.
It started
or
moving
rotated.
south as they started developing that
Grandstands.
west end.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
because the college and the high school played football in that arena.
That's right, yeah. Your family weren't rodeo people?
No, my dad was not a horse person. My mother was a horse, she was an animal person.
I remember her as a dog person.
Yeah, she was a dog person, but she also had a great love for horses and
Okay.
taught and passed that appreciation for horses on to her kids. It took better with myself and my sister. My brother did it because everybody else was doing it, but as soon as I stopped riding, he stopped.
Grabbed a golf club and away
Yep,
we
that
went.
was it.
Would you say that the group in general was primarily town kids, or?
No, I think it was. I
Other
was
way
an exception.
Yeah,
I was.
okay.
Now Johnny Vaughn was a city kid too. He lived up on 3rd Street like me,
Okay.
just a block away from me. But the rest of the kids, Bledsoe and Bridge and Mitchell and
Sure,
and the Storleys and all the Billy Moore and Hagler, all those kids were outside of town. They were all country kids.
But not necessarily rodeo kids.
No, no.
Were most of their parents involved in the Ellensburg Rodeo Sheriff's Posse, or not necessarily?
No, I don't think too many. Well, so Johnny Vaughn's dad was on a rodeo board at one time, and so was Mac's dad.
Okay.
And Frank Moore, that was Billy's dad, that helped. He drove for Leonistes, I think, or it was another company. He drove tanker, I remember that. And they lived right at just past the slide area on the Highway 10 in the flats there. No, they weren't that
So it
involved.
wasn't as if
It wasn't really associated, those folks weren't really rodeo folks.
Okay. Huh.
They just appreciated horses and that their kids were riding and learning
Sure.
about animals.
Yeah. Was it connected with 4-H at all? Was there any overlap there? It was a standalone organization?
It was a standalone organization.
Nice.
Yep.
I don't know that there are riding drill team groups
I don't.
currently. You know, there's a,
Well, we actually had one in our, as a specialty act,
Yeah.
about 5 years ago. A bunch of kids, and they were out of California, as I remember, I
Okay.
think. And they did basically a drill.
okay.
And we drilled in the rodeo at least twice that I can remember.
Each year or?
No, just
Okay.
once we drill, well, actually we would drill sometimes every perf
Okay, yeah.
as a specialty act, I
Yeah.
guess was what we were,
Okay.
so to speak.
How many competitions would the group go to a summer?
5 or 6,
Okay.
and then we'd do some parades.
Each family was responsible for getting to the event, or did you
Every
travel as a
family was
group, or-
responsible to get the kids to the event. The horses were always hauled by Rod Hussey.
Rod Hussey, okay.
Yeah, Rod in his red truck
Okay.
with a trailer he'd put all those horses in there and tie them nose to tail and all the way up to the front, and the same with the trailer, and he hauled all the horses, and every trip we ever took, Rod hauled us.
Was there a designated number of members in any given competition, or?
No, you could have as many as you wanted. We
Okay.
typically had, I'm thinking we had 16 to 20 at any one time.
Okay, and your drill or your performance
Yep.
would be based on the number of people
No, the
you
drill
had,
was
or-
pretty much the same.
Oh, okay.
It had a pattern to it, and there were some crosses, and you had to keep your spacing, and it was always, you were riding in pairs most of the time, so you had to be aware of where you were with the
Sure.
person next to you, and so it taught a lot of good things about horsemanship and awareness and responsibility, and
Absolutely.
you know, and of course, when you take care of an animal, I think that's a good thing for a person to learn that skill.
Yeah, and that sounds like was an emphasis of the group
Oh,
as
you
well.
bet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You were watering and feeding your animal and
Yeah.
grooming it and taking care of it. It wasn't, Rod Hussey wasn't taking care of your
No,
horse
he
when you
just
got
he
there.
just hauled them.
Yeah.
He hauled them, and
Super.
you know, sometimes we loaded out of the old stockyards out there on Vantage Highway, and sometimes we loaded out of the rodeo grounds.
Okay. Forgotten what I was going to ask. I had a good question for you. I'll go back to my script. How long were you in existence? 20 years?
Well, I've talked to kids that were in the group in the 70s, like Kevin McDowell was in the
Oh,
group.
he was, okay.
I wasn't aware of that.
Okay,
So it lasted into the 70s.
got it.
Once I started working a summer job, I didn't ride anymore.
Okay,
So that was in 1963 that I worked my first year for my uncle up on the Passmore place, and I couldn't make, I think I might have ridden that year, but I know I didn't the next year.
got it. Who are some of the famous rodeo contestants that you remember during
Oh.
the time that you were a youngster?
Well,
Rick, or who?
so we would ride in the Grand Entry and then put our horses away, and then I would come around and I'd sneak into the west end of the arena, and I'd sit right next to a post, and figured nobody could see me, and I'm sure they did, but nobody ever bothered
No
me.
arena director hassle.
Nobody hassled me, and I would sit just inside the fence in the arena, and you know, I watched, you know, all the great ones. I mean, Casey Tibbs and Jim Shoulders and Winston Bruce and of course all the greats. I mean,
After that crew, Mahan and
I watched Harry Charters break his leg on a post because his steer went. That was when he was coming out of that side gate. The steer went to the left, and Harry went over there after him, and his knee got the arena post and broke his knee. You know, I watched all the great ones, and I watched, you know, the things that stick out is, I remember there were grandstands that were all along the east end of the track against the hillside, and they went all the way over to the Indian Trail.
Okay.
So there were grandstands from the Indian Trail all the way over to the main grandstand. And there was a bull that got out of the arena, jumped over the east end fence, and then he went out on the track, and then he went around to the east side of the track and started looking up in the stands, and all of a sudden I had this feeling he was going to go up into the stands, and he did. He jumped right up into the middle of the stands.
Holy cow.
And when he left his feet, the stands were full, and when he landed in the seats, there wasn't a person within 20 feet of him. So you remember those kinds of things, how athletic those bulls are. And of course, I remember the Dean Olivers and the great calf ropers and Roy Coopers. Of course, Cooper was roping when I was on the rodeo board too.
Sure,
So
yeah.
I've watched a few guys just as I've been on the board, but as a kid. And then of course, the clown, whoever the clown was, he would recruit whatever kids were hanging around.
Oh, yeah.
So I would get jammed into, you know, they jammed 40 of us into an old sedan and drive it out into the middle of the arena, and then we'd all unload out of the car, and that would be part of the act.
Part of his act. Sure.
Yeah, so.
Did most of the other Junior Posse members enjoy the rodeo as much as you did? They
Well, I think so.
Yeah.
I
can't speak for all of them.
I can't speak for all of them because I was very intent on making sure I saw the Ellensburg Rodeo as much as I can, and of course if I was in the grand entry, then I got to see, I was there for every rodeo, so it was very special.
Rick, what closing comments would you have about the Ellensburg Rodeo you'd like to share on behalf of the Junior Rodeo Posse?
Well, it was the main focus of our year, the Ellensburg Rodeo. And we all look forward to riding in the parade and riding in the grand entry and being around the cowboys that, you know, it was just one of those things that was very, very exciting and you look forward to it. And we all developed a very special relationship with our horses, you know. I mean, they become part of you, the horses. I mean, you never forget a really good horse.
Yeah, that's.
And we all appreciated, I think, we had a good camaraderie and a good relationship. And Cal Shull was our drill master, at least all the time I was there.
Right.
And he was a really nice guy, and Frank Moore helped. And
Was there a community service component at all to the group? Did they engage in civic
I think
activities?
I think we did some things. We might have handed out programs and stuff for the rodeo, so we did try to help, you know, as much as we could.
Sure.
But we were, you know, kids.
Yeah. You look forward to traveling to the other events, but the Ellensburg Rodeo was the highlight of the year.
It's always been the
Culmination of summer.
the culmination, and it wasn't really until I started watching other rodeos and being exposed to other rodeos that I realized how really special this event is. I mean, it really is.
It's interesting you'd say that.
Because when you grow up here, it happens. You take it for granted.
Ellensburg Rodeo, yeah.
And then you go And you get older and you start watching other events. And of course now on the Cowboy Channel, you can watch every one that happens.
Sure.
And it's just really neat how special our rodeo has always been. Winston Bruce was a good friend of mine, and I remember standing against the chutes one day during one of the not during the Rustock event, but during a timed event, because he stood in the arena usually, and he said, you know, this is one of the most special event venues that there is in rodeo. He said it's just unique. There are no other rodeos that have this particular ambiance and the feeling of being close, and everything's focused on the arena.
Yeah.
And he's right. And he loved this rodeo.
There was some conversation about moving the rodeo grounds at one time.
Well,
I'm sure.
At one point, I was actually part of the architect of that movement, and the board decided that it was too important to the rodeo itself and the fair to not separate those two and to not move it, and so we stayed where we are, and I think it was the right decision.
Great. Rick, thanks for your time today.
Well, appreciate it, Nip, and thank you for everything that you've done for the Hall of Fame and the Ellensburg Rodeo yourself.
Another great part of the community, the Kittitas County Jr
Sheriff's Posse.
Sheriff's Posse. I keep wanting to say Junior Rodeo Posse, but
No.
Junior Sheriff's Posse.
No, we
No.
were, I think we wore a badge too, as I remember.
Nice.
We didn't
Were
wear
you deputized?
We didn't have a gun, but
Okay.
we wore a badge.
Terrific. Well, thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Thanks.